normally you guys, in addition to me, have the main problem of my Spanglish. Today, in addition to that, we have my throat. I have had this for the last 4 or 5 weeks. So I apologize. On purpose, I put some dense text slides, so maybe you guys can read, so I don't have to speak too much. But let me know, if unconsciously I start getting down the volume, okay? What I would focus today is mainly on some management issues, how that affect the profitability of phosphorus management for crop production, and some things related to water quality directly related to manure or phosphorus management. I have talked in this conference before about issues as tillage management. I have projects on studying cover crops impact on phosphorus loss, amendments like gypsum and alum, and so forth. But now I'm focusing mostly on the phosphorus management part. So this is a slide that I show always, that I show this when I talk to farmers or consultants in terms of what are some of the key issues in Iowa in terms of phosphorus management. And on purpose, for some of you, I may be preaching to the Pope, but also there are some of you, especially working in water quality projects, that you may be interested in some of the things that I say and I have, because in the future, I may actually help, in some of your projects for outreach. So we need to know, of course, the optimum Soll-Test levels and pre-application rates for deficient soils. We need to know yield and removal, okay, to maintain the optimum Soll-Test values over time. This is the main criterion in order to base the maintenance fertilization rates. We need to recognize within field variation in Soll-Test, in yield, and removal. And I am like the lone ranger between my colleagues in the North Central region in terms of insisting on this, These new technologies are not perfect. Some of them we are still learning how to use them. But really, we need to recognize the very large in most fields, spatial variability within fields, and try to do something about it to improve profitability and water quality. The fertilizer placement, that's something that when people are talking about fertilizer management, one of the first things that they think about is the Soll-Test. And in Iowa, we have all kind of research that I did over the last 20 years, which shows the same thing that have been showing since the 50s, that there is not much impact of phosphorus placement for any tillage system for yield, okay, other than starter, in some situations. But this is a good thing because we don't need expensive equipment to band or to inject phosphorus. But on the other hand, this could be good for water quality. So, but that's a cost that is added. And we have recognized that in the nutrient reaction strategy. And then, of course, we need to use manure nutrients efficiently. Okay, there is a major effort in the state geared to that. So these are some of the things. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about specifics of recommendations. I mean, we have these publications. Some of you may not be interested. This, for example, is a new publication that I put together, Dr. Sawyer, on sampling. We put it together last December. On October 2013, we updated some of our recommendations, although the main update was for potassium, because for phosphorus, we keep finding essentially the same thing over the last few decades. Now, I put the word precision in the title because of purpose, because you see, when you talk to farmers or consultants, and you use the word precision, or precision agriculture, the three things that they think about is grid sampling, of course, compared with the classic sampling by soil type, of course, based on GPS. The fertilizer P application with GPS, say variable rate, and then maybe strip tillage associated with banding with GPS, which is okay, it's good. But there are other things. Some pay attention to these things and don't pay attention to others that may be as important or more important in relation to precision of nutrient management. So for example, about using research-based application rates, okay? That should be precision management too, not to use to apply phosphorus or potassium just in case, to assure that they have a high level. Optimizing the use of manure and fertilizer. You see, it's not easy because the nutrient ranges in manure does not match the nutrient needs for crops. So we need to pay very attention to that, not just in terms of application, but also but the thinking and time to develop strategies. And then the timing and placement consideration for water quality. As I said, the timing is not an issue for phosphorus in Iowa, and the placement is not a big issue for yield. However, it may be an issue for water quality conservation. So I think that's what I was talking a little bit. We really need to get these precision things there, not just gadgets and GPS and beautiful maps. I mean, we need to talk about these other things too in terms of precision management. Now, there are some widespread myths, and I like the title of Dr. Castellano's presentation. Maybe I should have put that in the title too. And but these are some myths, that we have out there. It's tough because we have been working for years and still struggling with it. Some people say we need high testing soils for crop production. No, but 55% of the fields of Iowa, 50 to 60, depending what survey, what data you look, are high or very high in P, which in most of them we could stop applying P for anywhere from 5 to 20 years, 30 years before there is a probability of response. That's the truth. That's what we have up there. Then some say we ought to apply at least the amount of phosphorus removed, even in high testing soil. No, of course not. But most apply some P, this removal-based application, even in high testing soil. So many people have variable rate. I mean, you see these nice things, GPS, and on the gravel roads all over Iowa, but most likely they're still applying a removal-based rate or a fraction to high testing soils. And then the other, of course, can't trust manure nutrients because of the uncertainty about crop availability, the variability of analysis, and difficult uniform application. Now, some of these things are common concerns, and there are some issues. It's not easy to manage manure. We need to understand that. We need equipment, we need time, and even if things are done perfectly, there is the possibility of errors. It's more complicated, more expensive than applying fertilizers. So, but this is something, especially these two top, and also this because you see now, CAFOs, large animal operators, they have to use nutrient management plans or manure management plans. But there are hundreds, thousands of smaller farmers in Iowa that essentially we don't know what is they're doing in terms of the manure management. And many small farmers add up in some regions. So we have all these calibrations of soil test with yield response. That's my main job since I started as a postdoc here in 1989 and then as a professor. So I'm not going to bore you today with that. But we have this relationship between soil test P and we have all these methods, Mallarino, goals and all that stuff. And I keep doing that. And essentially these classes have changed little since the 60s. And I keep doing that, even right now. I have 20, 25 sites every year checking this, working. You see, because just people don't believe it. They believe that we need high testing soil. So we need to have that research. So we are doing that. The other thing is that, as I said, the placement. And I'm not going to show any data. See, I've shown that out there. I have lots of data about that in terms of the placement. You see, some people honestly believe, that by banding, things like that, that they can have a great impact, on saving the fertilizer, phosphorus, or potassium, and then save, minimize the risk of loss for water quality. But they need to understand that the data doesn't show a much an advantage, an economic advantage. So when we go with a little flag of the banding or injection for phosphorus, and I'm not talking about nitrogen, that's a different story, we need to be careful because it is at a cost for the farmer. And we recognize that in the nutrient strategy. But it is important, to consider that. The other important leg that I showed in the first slide is the issue of the application based on removal. Now we have lots of data, we have long-term experiments, but we now are in danger of being closed because we don't have much funding, but essentially have been showing trends of removal, Soll-Test values over time, so we know what different application rates do over time. And the recommendations that we have for removal amounts are based on sound research. I mean, we have done research over many years on that. So, but what happened? It is clear that the yield level affects the removal. Of course, higher yield, more removal. And it's also true that yield monitors are an excellent tool to measure yield and then estimate removal. And we have this in the recommendation. But what happened? Most farmers don't do the most profitable thing. Even those that they say they are using precision management techniques, because they use GPS, or they may be using variable rate, but they may be applying the wrong rates, but they don't look at that, or they don't trust the recommendations, okay? So for example, many use yield goal instead of proven yield, or a reasonable yield, to apply that removal rate. And then of course they're applying higher rates than needed, because farmers, when you say yield goal, they can dream, 300 bushels, all over the place, and means 100, okay? Then many of them, of course, some consultants, co-ops, and farmers, they believe that they really need to maintain high or very high Soll-Test levels, and they keep applying removal base rate, even when they're using variable rate and GPS. Okay, and then many believe that optimum Soll-Test levels, see this ppm, that we show, in our recommendations, that for high yield levels should be high, and not. At least for now, the yield levels we have, it's not. We say that 20 parts per million and 6 inches is enough for corn. It doesn't matter if you have 100 bushels or 280. I don't have higher yields than that. So what happens is that they apply rates higher than needed to maximize yield because of some of these concepts. So again, this is precision management. They may increase profits and improve water quality by doing this. Okay, and then we have all these evaluations about the profitability of rates. I did this years ago with 43 sites that we have at least 0, 50, or 100 pounds. For you to have an idea, 100 is what we recommend for corn for soil testing very low. Now, I have now like 10, 15 more experiments over the last 3 years, but I didn't add it. This is the yield, this is bushel, yield increase versus our interpretation classes, okay? And this is some net returns. I forgot to put what prices I put. I think it were last year, 2 years ago. You see, you apply fertilizer to high testing soils, there is a loss to investment. And many times, even if we apply the recommended removal rate, which is 50 pounds, also there is either close to break even or a loss. However, out there, what you hear is that IOST recommendations are too low. That's what people say. Well, show me. We have all this data, on-farm research, research farms, all kind of data. We show that. But then we go and put this together. These are not models. These are real data. I don't like models too much. I like real data. Mike is smiling. No, I'm kidding. But these are real numbers. So there's no smoothing, no nothing, no running average, nothing. So what I did here, these are net returns to one crop, fertilization, for 3 price scenarios. This is what it was about 4 years ago, and now we are in between these two. So it is obvious that as Soll-Test values increase, and I put here interpretation classes, the level of the profits decrease. Okay, but if you look at this, in spite of the variability, even with horrible prices, we are not quite here yet. In the very low and low, there is a predominance of profits, in low testing soils. But when we go to high testing soils, and of course we don't recommend fertilization there, but we just put here the removal rate, then there is a loss to investment. And we have shown this year and year, and we have that. And even the optimum. I mean, if you look at the optimum here, if you average all these points here in the optimum, it's a little bit above the break-even. But with these low prices, it's a bit below the break-even. But out there, they say that even our removal-based recommendations for soil testing optimum are too low. And they want to maintain a high, not an optimum. Well, here are the numbers. Okay. So, of course, there are issues that we could do because soil testing is important, you see. So I have done lots of work in sampling. This is an example the work we did years ago with a PhD student. This was published. We evaluated some of this sampling. And this is why, for P&K at least, I strongly support grid sampling. Well done grid sampling, with enough number of cores and so forth. Because it is obvious that when we compare the doable grid sampling, which is about 2.5 acres, versus zone sampling or versus sampling by soil type, there is an improvement with the grid sampling, of course. I mean, and of course we can, take millions of soil samples and play with scenarios. This was done really with an efficiency, an efficacy index with yield response. So grid sampling, a well-done grid sampling, is better to identify different areas within field with different needs. And then we can go with the variable rate and apply, if we apply the right rate, not a high rate just in case, then it's better for the farmer and for water quality. Now, I cannot go with the rosy flag, the variable rate and grid sampling will always increase yield, because that depends on the soil test levels. The probability is that any field out there tests optimum or high. So the yields may not increase. Yeah, you may find some pockets very low in some fields. Okay, so it is important. We should not sell a technology without recognizing the pitfalls, when really it could work. And this goes for everything, for variable rate, for cover crops, for everything. Okay. So, but even in fields with predominantly optimum to high soil P, variable rate is efficient because avoid application to high testing areas. If the farmer, the consultant, whoever is doing, don't apply to these high testing areas. That's a big if. And we have all kind of on-farm research. We work with the funding from the Leopold Center, the Iowa Soybean Association, and others. This is an example where we have 3 corn soybean rotation cycles with either uniform application based on average soil test or variable rate to see the soil test P change after these 3 cycles. You see, with the uniform application, in the gray bars, we are almost about the same in terms of change. But with variable rate, which is the black bars, we increase more in low testing areas within a field. And we decrease with high testing soils. Of course, some consultant and farmers look at this and they die of a heart attack. What do you mean? We are mining the soil. Well, yeah, if it is high, why not? This is the right thing to do. And then when it starts going down into the optimum, then you start applying removal-based rates. So it does work. Not perfect, but it does work. Okay, the issue of the manure nutrients, that's complicated, and I could talk 1 hour if I want. By the way, this in May, Dr. Sawyer and I updated our guidelines for manure nutrients. It's for most animal manures are the same. We just put new data that I have for beef manure phosphorus, and we put some new data for dairy manure too there in that publication. So what happened? We need to use the nitrogen in manures. We have to. So the farmers can use that manure and they avoid buying nitrogen fertilizer for those anhydrous plants that Mike showed. But the problem is that the manure NP ratios do not match the crop needs. Okay, seldom match. And if we, because of the nitrogen P ratio, or mainly the availability of nitrogen, the For example, in poultry manure, it's about 50–60% in the first year, but in liquid soy manure, it's about 90%. So then, if we applied N-based manure, then with swine manure for corn soybean rotations, seldom there is a buildup. In fact, now, because of the use of phytes and other things, we may need more phosphorus for the second year soil. Okay. But in poultry manure, there is a large buildup, always. And in continuous corn, there is always a large buildup. We apply any manure to continuous corn. That in 5–6 years, we just shoot up, the soil phosphorus. So, no, it's not perfect, but we should use manure analysis, we should follow availability and application guidelines, and use the P index to avoid excessive buildup. This is also precision management, not just the GPS stuff or the beautiful maps that everybody likes and loves. And we have the data. This is just an example we did years ago with soil. We published this. This is averages for some responsive sites, or we have different phosphorus fertilizer rates for corn without manure or after applying manure at different rates. Okay, you see, when we apply manure, even a rate that applies not all the nitrogen needs for our corn, we don't get any effect of the fertilizer rate. And in fact, we see this manure effect because we apply supposedly nitrogen and potassium non-limiting rates across all plots. But see, with manure, we get a higher yield level. Sulfur, micronutrients, physical properties, I don't know. So they need, it's not perfect, but they need to trust it. They need to spend the time to analyze manure. They need to spend the time to apply manure uniformly. The problem is that all of us, including farmers, need to do more with less time lately, but needs time. Needs to do things careful. It is worth doing it. Okay, so when we talk about phosphorus loss from fields, where we have mainly the particulate and dissolved P loss, in the last conference last year, I talked about different management practices, including conservation practices, how affect the loss of dissolved P or particulate P. I'm not going to talk about that now. It is clear that we need a comprehensive risk assessment tool with Soll-Test and just the optimum rates. That's not enough for reducing the impact of phosphorus management on water quality. And I'm going to talk about the P index, but we have the source factors, the soil and water conservation practice, etc. I'm talking just mainly about the source factors now. And of course, we have this in the nutrient reaction strategy, and the P index is the core of some of the estimates and scenarios in the nutrient reaction strategy. And as Mike said, for nitrogen, if you look at these numbers here, which is the percent loss reduction, here we have the phosphorus management, placement rate, and so forth. And here we have other things, and in general, it is other thing. These conservation practices, rotation, etc., that make the large cut, see? But what happens is that some of these things, like maintaining Soll-Test P in the optimum class, that increase profit for the farmer, okay? And then we have about 70% of Iowa covered with corn soybean rotation without cover crops or anything like that. So a small reduction in this is free. They get more money, and we have an impact, across the landscape. So a couple of things. The Soll-Test P is not a big deal for phosphorus loss with tight drainage. And people think about that because they think with their mind, nitrogen in their mind, okay? They need to punch clear, forget about nitrogen, okay? These are some of the data we have. And it doesn't matter what experiment, what year, what we do, manure, no manure. One can have up to about 3 times more soil P than is optimum for crops. And we cannot detect a change in the base loss, of phosphorus with tight drainage. being concentration or in loss. Okay, I'm not saying that in fields without drainage they should have 3 times more phosphorus than they need. What I'm saying, the big deal is not this. The big deal is the runoff. That's where the issues are. B total or dissolved P. That's the key. And there is a linear relationship. Okay, and then we also have to be truthful, you see, because 16 or 20 ppm is the optimum, you see. Until about 30 parts per million or so, we cannot even detect a different impact. So I'm not going to pull my hair if somebody wants to maintain a 30 or 25 instead of a 20, okay, on average. But we should not be about here in this area. Okay, so the other thing that we did is we look at the impact, for example, of tillage. And of course, no-till reduces soil loss, there's no doubt. And it also, this is an average of 6 years experiment done with Iowa. And we also reduce with no-till, we reduce both the total P loss. But you know what? We may increase the dissolved P loss. So this is an issue, and we are working with that now. We have a couple of projects looking at this. Because we can reduce cover crops. I have a study with cover crops. We reduce soil loss and total P loss, but we may increase the dissolved P loss. At least we may increase the proportion of dissolved P. We're working with that. I don't have final numbers. But I'm showing this for this. Look at the losses of phosphorus in the corn year with soybean residue. Look at the losses in the soybean year with corn residue. Okay, soybean, I like soybean growers. I like the fact that soybean reduces the nitrogen somehow, the amount of nitrogen needed by the following corn. But soybean in sloping grounds, it's a problem. We need to pay attention to that. We need to pay attention. And this is something that some of my friends from the Soybean Association don't like when I say this, but we need to. We need to, the issues about applying the right rate. And remember, about 3/4 of the Iowa farmers apply the phosphorus or manure on soybean residue going to corn. We need to look at that. The management practices, the conservation practices, the cover crops, all the stuff is more important than soybean residue. And if you look out there, what is the majority of the farmers doing with cover crops? They are planting cover crops on corn residue going to soybean because it's easy, there's no yield drag in most years. So we need to recognize this. We're working on that. And we need to emphasize the sloping ground, okay, these issues. Okay, the other important issue is the time of application. It's not important for yield, we have lots of data, but it may be important, and it is important for phosphorus loss. This is an experiment years ago. This is swine manure at different rates. We have dissolved phosphorus here, total phosphorus here. We have incorporated, non-incorporated, with created runoff within 24 hours application, 15 days later, or 6 months later. See, you look at the, especially the dissolved P, it's about the same for total P. Without incorporation, we applied P, as phosphorus goes, with runoff. If it is incorporated, there's not that much. But just 2 weeks of the phosphorus sitting there in the surface without a runoff, cut that a lot. We cannot even detect differences, even with these rates, which is kilos of P. So this is like about 100 pounds of P2O5. And then 6 months later, in the spring, we don't see any difference between the two. We need to look at when that, especially the surface applied phosphorus is applied. So we look into that, and we compare soil manure, poultry, liquid soil manure, and fertilizer for dissolved P and total P. And we look at the impact of a runoff event and incorporation. The problem with fertilizer, when we have a runoff event close near the application, this is the big deal. It's less very important with manure. It's a little impact with poultry manure because it's solid. And beef manure is the same. We have data for beef manure. Now, we incorporate the phosphorus. It was 100 pounds. And then we cut these losses. But the cut is most significant for fertilizer than for manure. But you know what? We just live in the surface. We don't do tillage. If there is even a 10-day delay in a runoff event, we have phosphorus losses even less than when we do the incorporation. So this is easy. It's not very easy for manure because they need to get rid of they need to empty the pits, you know, or the stocking pile. But for fertilizer, it's important. So I will skip this slide because I don't have much time. I believe that by doing things that increase the profitability of crop production for phosphorus use, and look at this issue when the phosphorus is applied. Contrary to what we say for nitrogen, if the phosphorus will be broadcast, it's better to put in the fall and don't listen to what the wind brings from Ohio. Northern Ohio is a different planet in terms of the soils and the climate. Okay? If somebody wants to create a disaster, don't put phosphorus brooks in the fall and put in the spring, especially no-till, when we have the highest intensity of rain. So we need to use good soil sampling, variable rate, with good recommendations. Don't apply reductive rates or maintain high testing soils, especially in sloping ground and with soybean residue. But 3/4 of Iowa farmers are doing that on soybean residue going to corn. They're applying build-up rates or they're applying the 2-year rate before corn on soybean residue. And I'm saying, why don't you put a 2-year rate before soybean? It's the same thing. I have the data. But of course, they die if they do that. Okay. Broadcast fertilizer, they're going to broadcast the fertilizer. Do it in the fall, before snow or soil freeze, as early as possible, because the soil doesn't fix, but retain the phosphorus. So when it comes to snow melt or the rain from the spring, there is little runoff. Again, different to what happened in Canada or Ohio or northern Minnesota. Those are different planets. Do not extrapolate things from one region to another. With solid manure, there is more flexibility. It doesn't matter much. You put in the fall and the spring. And then, of course, I didn't talk about it, but it's important because this could make the big cut. But of course, they cost more money. They are more difficult to apply, which is use conservation practices to reduce erosion and sulfur runoff. Again, mainly with soybean residue. That's the key. Okay, with that, I think I didn't do too badly. We have a break now, so in spite of my voice, please, if you have comments, questions, or agreements or disagreements, let me know. Yes, sir.
So are you implying, I mean, that the hog manure or any of the manure has, your nitrogen is such that you're going to apply, more P than you need. So you're talking about applying at a reduced rate and then coming back with a separate application of nitrogen?
Yes, that's not a big issue. The question is, what do we do when we apply in base manure? Well, with liquid soil manure for corn soybean rotation, it's not a big deal. If you apply 4,000 or 5,000 gallons of manure, you're applying the nitrogen the corn needs and the phosphorus that usually the corn and the soybean needs. Now, need to watch because sometimes it may be too much more than for the soybean, but sometimes it may be less. So we need to watch that. But with poultry manure, yes. I mean, applying 4 or 5 tons of chicken manure, to supply all the nitrogen of corn. I mean, in 4 or 5 years, this just increase or just be like that. Now, not many do that. You should apply a ton or 2. But even with that, you apply half of the nitrogen to the corn, but you're applying the phosphorus for 3, 4 crops, even by doing that. And then it continues on, of course, it's a disaster. Now, but I still say we need to use the nitrogen manure. So we need to use the P index. So when the phosphorus levels builds up to a certain level that we start getting into the high or something like that, then we can stop. And I have had on-farm research with farmers that, a few, I can count them with my hand, that they put manure phosphorus-based, and then they supply nitrogen with variable rate. Not many do that. But at some point, we have to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comment? Let's go to get the cookies.